Hello, everybody. It is Romania Black, and we are on episode 6 of Moriarty the Patriot, the Noahtic, Act 1. I think it's Noahtic. I think that's how you say it. But I'm really excited because the gang's all here now. Last episode, I apologized for simping over Colonel Moran, but I couldn't help it. I realized when I was editing the video, I'm like, God, say his name right. So I'm so sorry y'all had to deal with that. It's like, sometimes pronunciation is my worst thing. And so Colonel Moran, oh my gosh, I love his character. I love it a lot. And so I'm really excited now that we're getting into episode 6. So the first season of this show was what, 11 episodes? And then the next season was 13, something like that, or it's 12 and 12, one of the two. So this was split into 2 sections, so it's technically 2 seasons. So we're at the halfway point, or at least we're a fourth of the way into the series with this episode, a fourth of the way into the series, and halfway into season 1. So exciting. Obviously no Sherlock yet, but I honestly did not expect to see Sherlock until maybe towards the end of this first season or towards the halfway point, because this isn't Sherlock's story. It's Moriarty's story. But before we start, I did want to say a couple of things. Ruben on Patreon noted this about the Edie, and I thought it was really cool. The idea that all of Louis and Albert and Moriarty's paintings as children is kind of a representation of all the crimes that they've done later on in the series, because except it's made cute because instead of blood all over their hands, they have paint all over their hands. And so they're all muddy and dirty and everything with their crimes. But they're kids, so it's viewed as it's more innocent, right? And at the very end, we see them all under the waterfall getting rinsed clean, and then we see like the family crest and the blood in the water. So it's very cool interpretation. I like that a lot. If you're on Patreon, you can see his interpretation back for episode 4 when that had came out. But aside from that, someone else had noted in the comments the idea that Moriarty as a character, and I agree with this, Moriarty as a character sort of likes to make sure that all the crimes are not only perfect, but they're covered up in a way that no one else involved would be suspected or have anything come against them. Which kind of ties back to Moriarty's character of being compassionate towards those in the lower classes, which I really like that. I get a little wary though, because back when it was just Albert and Lewis and Moriarty, that was pretty easy because you just had 2 people to watch over. Moriarty just had to watch over Albert and Lewis when they were covering up. But now you've also got Fred, you've also got Colonel Moran. How many people are you going to get involved in the crew? You know, you've got 4 people now, William Moriarty does. He has 4 people he has to keep track of now instead of just 2. So that's double the work to hide the crime scene and everything and make sure nothing ties back. So like, how do you know that the woman that Colonel Moran slept with isn't going to note that he was sniping a guy out his window? You know, so there's little factors like that, and you can argue she was asleep and she's not going to say anything, but there's little things like that to take into consideration. The more elaborate you make the plan, the more the more bases you have to cover, right? So I think that's interesting. And then I'm assuming that once you get like a mastermind like Sherlock in on this, then it's going to make your job that much harder. So I'm excited for that moment when we get to it, that Sherlock's going to complicate things. I'm excited for that, but we've not reached it yet, I don't think. So we shall see though. I really like this series. This has been a lot of fun. I really don't want the OP to change, but it will. But some of you have said the second OP is really good too, so I'll keep an open mind. But yeah, let's dive into this, shall we? We are going to get into episode 6 of Moriarty the Patriot here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, I cannot believe that we already have Sherlock. Oh, what a fateful meeting. What a fateful meeting between our 2 boys. He didn't say what he was, though. Moriarty didn't say what he was, right? So the question is, does Moriarty know he's a detective? That he's an investigator? Or was he not? He was just guessing the things about Sherlock, not his profession. Interesting. He was trying to one-up him, right? You know, Sherlock had the part where he, like, explained why Moriarty was the mathematician. And then Moriarty just had to one-up him by being like, I'm not just going to explain your career, I'm going to explain things about you. Very Sherlock style. I have a feeling that their banter back and forth is going to be exceptional, and I'm so excited. Oh my gosh. I may have to watch episode 7. I may have to watch episode 7. I may not be able to wait. These two-parters, y'all. These two-parters, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But oh my gosh, this episode. So the Hounds, is the Hounds of Baskerville? I need to look that up real quick. Because there's a Sherlock story that it's the Hounds of, the Hound of Baskerville. That is a Sherlock story. And so at the beginning of this, that's what I thought this whole episode was going to be. But then the Noahtic, which is a play on the Titanic, it turned out to be something different. I guess the thing we were setting up from the Hounds of Baskerville is the idea that this guy is basically a serial killer. Blitz Enders, with a name like that. It's like, really, parents, you named your kid Blitz Enders? Okay. But definitely a serial killer that views hunting people like hunting animals. And that's kind of the way he hides behind it. And he's like feral whenever he kills people. There was some animation of him that was like, oh my God. Like, and this guy's also like the biggest douche in the world. Oh my gosh. But so establishing that he is our main. At the beginning, I didn't know if he's the guy that was taking revenge. But then I was like, I should have known. As soon as he had that smirk, it's like, nah, he's the bad guy. But oh my gosh. So we have a bit to talk about in this episode, actually. Not only with Sherlock and his reveal. I'm so excited. I'm so freaking excited. But with all of our characters, really. And then Moriarty's plan of plunging the world into crime and purifying it. Because at first, Colonel Moran and Fred didn't quite seem on board with the idea. Albert's all for it. Albert's like, let's do this. Like, Albert is gung-ho to get this done. I like how Albert just absolutely completely is like, we're on the same wavelength. It's like, I get that Albert is enamored by Moriarty. And then, Sherlock. We haven't seen Watson yet, though. We haven't seen Lewis. I need to rewatch this. But the idea of the skull ring that Sherlock has, I'm like, oh, I love it. It's so good. It's so good. But yeah, so anyway, let's get past the intro here and back to this episode. So the whole idea of the Noahtic and the idea of him getting on the ship, the ship of dreams. But I like how the Enders guy gives this whole spiel about upper class society and how better they are than the peasants, the peasantry. I like how he gives it to Fred of all people. He gives the talk to Fred. And I'm like, isn't Fred kind of middle class or lower class working for the ship? Is he, you're basically telling him how awful his own people are? His own classes? Is that what you're doing, Enders? It was a very odd choice. Like, I could understand if Enders was making that speech to Moriarty because he views Moriarty in the upper echelon as well. But the fact that he gave it to Fred is a very odd moment. And I wonder if in the manga it's a little bit differently, or if that's just Enders' character and he's kind of a dumbass, you know? Because he is really arrogant, super cold-hearted, and just downright straight up cruel to everybody. And there's some of you that were commenting. I like this comparison before I say what I was going to say, where I'm at the point where he's talking about Noah being chosen by God, and he's like, you guys are commoners. He was a nobleman. And I'm like, no. Like, I'm going to stop you right there. No, I don't think Noah was a nobleman. I think he was pretty common in the story. But you interpret that however you want to, Enders. But what I was saying is some people have commented how the one aspect of the show that's kind of cartoony is just how awful the noble people are. And I commented back, I think it was in episode 4 when this was brought up, but I commented back that I think it's more of a cool tie to Victorian lit, because in a lot of Victorian literature, the people that are villains, they are outright cruel and awful. I was like, have you read Oliver Twist? There's a lot of Victorian literature and literature that's based around the time that this story takes place, where the villains are over the top. Like, the whole vaudeville mustache twirling villain, like, they're just downright awful people. And so many characters in literature around that time were such exaggerated features, exaggerated figures, but they were representations of just how bad society could be at that time. So while it seems like it's like a caricature, in the same vein, it was addressing just how some of these people really were and just how cruel they could be. And so, yeah, it's cartoony and over the top how much Enders is awful. But at the same time, I kind of get it. And there are people that are this awful in the real world. It's just not all of society are. I think that was nice that we had last episode with Tate and was it Lucian, with them, where we got to see that society, the nobility, isn't all messed up. There are some good eggs in there, buried beneath all the horror that we've seen in this show so far with upper class society. But so we get to this point where Moriarty has the blueprints of the ship. I think that's really cool. He has the whole blueprints laid out. He can see the outline of the ship. So it's nice because that means they can go over the ship and see where all the rooms are, and they can calculate their plan on a grand scale before enacting it on the ship. That's really neat. But he says, I've been thinking about how imbalanced this country is for a long time. Since he was a kid, basically. It is unnecessary to reiterate that the principal cause of this unbalance is a class system that is enjoyed by the handful of aristocrats. Yeah, the 3%, as they call it, are enjoying themselves. And we must contend against it. And I like that Colonel Moran's like, okay, well, so we fight. Well, how do we fight? What do we do? And then William's like, well, the system is not immediately alterable. We can't just immediately enact change. But there is something that we can begin to do right away, that we can start. And we can plunge London down into the depths of hell and turn it into a crime-filled city. With the flames and the fire around him. Yeah, so just, it's like lighting the city on fire in that moment. And I like to imagine that this vision is not only Moriarty's, but it's also Albert's. Because even Lewis acts surprised in that moment. He's like, oh, this is your plan, brother? What? And Fred acts surprised, and Moran acts surprised. But not Albert. Albert's like, yes, please, sign me up. So I like that. I get the feeling, I don't ship Albert and William at all, but I get the feeling that William is just totally on board, or Albert is totally on board the William Moriarty train. He's all about it. And then Moran's like, okay, well, explain. How does that lead to our goal of improving the country if it's all on fire and burning? And then he explains a little bit more in detail. He's like, crime is not the end, it's a means. Meaning that the crime-filled city is not going to be how it ends, it's just going to be what we're going to do to make it get better. And it's like, okay, well, explain more, because only Albert still seems on board. You can't change the system immediately, but you can change the minds of people immediately. Because, and we've seen this in other shows. I've been watching Modao Zushi at the same time, and in that series, even though it's a Chinese donghua, in that series, gossipers they run rampant in the city, and people's mindsets change in an instant. They're like, oh, well, we believe this. Oh, well, now we believe this. Oh, really? You think that? Okay, now we believe this. Like, people can be easily manipulated, is basically the thing. And you can change their mindsets if you just provide some shred of proof or something that has the means to do so. And so people have a wide range of emotions and are creatures who act upon them. So the thing that spurs the human mind to action above all else is death. So death is going to make people act a certain way and think a certain way. And then Albert's like, of course, Will. Death is more instrumental than anything. Like acting like a damn aristocrat over here. And I like that Colonel Moran goes, well, if my death is required for your plan, then I'll offer it to you anytime, sure. And I like his cufflinks, by the way. Moran's is very nice. And he's like, Fred's going to be the same, right? But that's not what Moriarty wants. He says the citizens of London are about to witness the many crimes and deaths that I have tailored for them. So essentially, what he's planning is to plunge the city into the fires of hell. What it actually is he's like, I've orchestrated this stage. London is our stage. And we're going to have all of these crimes take place. And the crimes will expose the awfulness of the upper class society. We're going to show just how cruel and awful the nobility are. And by doing that, the people will eventually revolt up and take down the establishment. Slowly but surely, right? Kind of like when he was getting the kids back in episode 2 to be like, what happens if a noble attacks you? And they're like, kill him! Like, it's that idea to change the mindsets of the people. And I like in this puppet demonstration here that at the end of the play, Moriarty's voice is alongside the puppet that was killed. And he's like, aha. So, and yeah. And then, of course, Moran instantly gets on board in that case. He's like, oh, cool. So we're the ones pulling the trigger. I can do that. And then the metaphor and the symbolism of all the bodies of nobility just piled up and the sunlight coming down like it's a ray of sunshine and hope. It's funny because I see Moriarty's plan and I see the reasoning behind it. It's just humorous because from Sherlock's perspective, this is awful. From Sherlock's perspective, you're going to kill a lot of people that necessarily didn't have to die to make your point and to have your revolution. In Sherlock's mindset, this is probably all a very bad idea. But in Moriarty's mind, it's like, well, this is Moriarty the Patriot. This is patriotism, right? We're helping to free our country by getting rid of the dregs of society. But the dregs of society aren't the common folk or the lower class like the nobility think. The dregs of society are nobility itself. So interesting. I'm very curious about all this. And so our first illustrious star is Blitz Enders. He's going to be the start of it. And so the whole, which it's such manipulation because the whole idea was just to piss him off and piss him off to the point where he reveals his bloodlust as a serial killer and get him to kill a guy. And then presumably, I'm sure Moriarty is going to try to like frame him or do something with this. I'm very curious what he's going to do confronting him about the murder. That's the one part I'm like, did he anticipate that the one guy would get stabbed? How does this figure into the plan? But I like that the guy that they set up for all this was a criminal himself. So it's in a place where the man's a criminal. He's a wanted murderer. He somehow got onto this ship without anybody stopping him. But when they do the autopsy and find out who it is, they're going to be like, oh, well, this guy was a murderer anyway, so he's dead. Oh, well. And they may not go into as much depth of the autopsy knowing who he is, because that's just how the society works. So interesting. But then, yeah, Sherlock's on the damn ship. Oh my God. So yeah, when you saw him out looking at the boat, it's, So I wonder if it's just coincidence that Sherlock's on the boat, if it's just coincidence that he's on the boat, or if he was suspecting something was going to go on. I'm so curious if there's something more to it. And then Moriarty saying, oh, he won't be a bother. I'm like, you're setting yourself up, son, because Sherlock is going to be a bother. He's going to be a problem for you. Oh my gosh. They're here to put on a show, but it's like, I don't think it's going to go the way Moriarty wants it to. I think Sherlock's going to muck it up. And I'm so excited to see. Moriarty has these grand plans, but I think Sherlock's going to come and muck it up. But his action about having to eat in the lower decks and then telling the little girl that he'll kill her, I'm like, the Enders dude not only is like clearly a serial killer, but also just the absolute worst. I'm like, you're awful. And of course the little girl had to be running around with a cup of cranberry juice. You know, these kids, watch where they're going. Yeah. And so then Moriarty setting everything up to get him agitated even more. And then, so yeah, I was curious when Moran enlisted this guy to follow around Enders and keep agitating him. I was curious because, like I said at the beginning of the episode, when you involve more and more people, there's more and more people to watch out for. But their intention all along was to get this guy injured, to get him killed, I mean. Because then when Moriarty says, we're going to use your, disheveled life to the fullest extent, they're like, you're a murderer and we're going to use it to our advantage. So we're just going to make you a pawn in all of this, which is interesting. Very interesting indeed. So yeah, we cut to the whole thing with the staircase, right? We get the thing with Albert first and the whole ballet aficionado. Apparently the first ballet on a ship is a big deal, which I guess there's nothing else going on. So what else does nobility have to worry about? But yeah, so Moriarty, he stops and looks up at the staircase and sees it all. But here's the thing. Sherlock was watching him this whole time. Sherlock was watching him. So even though he's talking to these women, he had Moriarty out of the corner of his eyes. It's like, ooh. And so when these girls said, how'd you know that gentleman was a soldier? I'm wondering if they were referring to Moran. If Sherlock's been slowly piecing together that there's some odd players on the ship. If that's what's going on. So I'm curious. But yeah, he's been watching him this whole time. And then I like that these three women, again, we talk about color patterns and color symbolism in this show. When Moriarty's walking towards the spiral staircase, there's like the red blotches of patterns of tiles on the ground, and it kind of looks like blood splatters. There's that. But then also the three women that are next to Sherlock asking him to guess professions. They're all wearing red, blue, and yellow, which are the primary colors. So I think that's very interesting. It's a very curious choice to make. And then, yeah. Oh, I got it. And then I like Moriarty's like, really? This will be the 10th in a row. Uh-huh. Yeah, they're settling a bet. And Moriarty's like, oh, a bet you say? I love it. Guess their occupations. And I love the slow, dramatic, and I'm sorry, but Sherlock running his hand through his hair, he's like, he's a mathematician, of course. It's like, subtle. With the skull ring. Uh-huh. And him looking right at Moriarty with the blue eyes versus the red eyes. Show. So I'm very curious. Moriarty was talking so fast because he's trying to one-up Sherlock that I didn't quite get to hear everything he was saying about him. So I want to go back and rewatch that. But yeah, he explains why he admires it. And Moriarty's like, oh, really? Wow, you got me. That's so funny. And so, yeah. Interesting. So he watched Moriarty for quite some time to make that note, right? He was watching him from a distance. So curious, Sherlock. Curious indeed. And I like that Moriarty tries to pass it off. He's like, well, his observation was a trifle forced. like, okay, sure, okay. And then, of course, the girls get really impressed. And so then, of course, because it's Moriarty, he's like, well, I can tell what you do. Let me try the same with you. Just I show you up. And Sherlock's like, oh, okay. And I like this. So I'm curious. He doesn't explain his rationale, right? He just says, I love that Sherlock explains the method and the means like he would in the novel. But when it comes to Moriarty, and Sherlock's like, well, how'd you know? And he's like, because it's obvious. I love it. He's like, it appears you can play the violin. Nonetheless, you're not a musician. And then you're adept in fighting and other physical abilities. So we're setting up Sherlock being able to handle some one-on-one confrontations with Moran, maybe. Setting up that maybe Sherlock can handle Moran. I'm all about, in the Robert Downey Jr. version of Sherlock, he's kind of able to physically, take care of himself. So if this Sherlock's like that too, I'm all on board with it. But then, yeah, he says, moreover, you have an interest in scientific experiments, which we don't know why. And it gets really close to him and like sniffs his coat. It's like, oh, come on, Moriarty. As well as a slight touch of chemical dependency. So, chemical dependency, are we saying tobacco or opiates? Because I think in the BBC Sherlock, he has like a drug problem a bit. And in the actual novel, I want to say he like did opiates maybe. Definitely smoked a pipe. But, so it could be tobacco he's smelling. Sherlock's like, oh, okay, you strike me as an Oxbridge man. But your dialect is more in the vein of the working class. So he's like, you're from a noble area, from an upper class area, but your speaking pattern is more of the blue collar class. So no doubt because you take pride in your ancestry. And it's probably from your mother's side in particular. Or am I mistaken? And I like that he's like, how'd you know? And then he expects him to tell him because it's obvious. And then I love that he just laughs. He's just like, oh, you're funny. And I like that this Sherlock is kind of disheveled. Like he doesn't have a belt. His suit jacket's like barely buttoned. He doesn't look tailored or anything. It just looks kind of, he's gangly and he has his hair up in a messy ponytail. It's like, he looks clumsy and aloof, but that's what Sherlock's supposed to kind of be on the surface, right? See you around, mathematician. Ooh. And then Moran's like, is anything the matter? And he's like, no, this should pose no great hindrance to our plan. It's like, oh, honey. Oh, you don't know Sherlock. Oh, I'm so excited. So yeah. I'm guessing the idea was to just keep nudging Enders until he made a mistake. So I'm guessing, obviously, they picked Enders as the target. They knew he had a history of killing people, or they suspected, or that was the rumor. And so they're just pushing him to the limit. And then he's pushed to the limit, and he kills that guy. And then they set it up to where Moriarty's going to walk in on him. So I'm curious to know what he's going to do with that. Is Moriarty going to try to like get him to like make some kind of deal with him so he doesn't tell? Is he going to... I'm so curious, like, why would Moriarty want to push Enders over the edge to kill that man and then walk in on him? Like, why would he want to set that up that way? What would be the point, right? Why would you set it up to where you catch him in the act? Because I thought what they were going to do is have Enders, once he killed the man, I thought the whole thing was Enders was going to hide the body or throw it over deck, and then he'd like start on this murderous rampage, and then they'd somehow expose him to everybody else that he was a serial killer and upper nobility. I thought that was the whole plan, but I don't know if that's the case anymore, if Moriarty's like finding him in the moment what he's doing. It's very odd. Huh. But yeah, oh my god, this episode was so much fun. I loved this. I'm so excited to see Sherlock. And yeah, that one line where he's like has the crazy blue eyes and like drinking the wine while smiling, like, come on, show. Make him look like a demon. But yeah, I cannot express to you how excited I am that Sherlock's involved. And here's the thing, we've not seen Lewis this entire time. This entire episode, Lewis has been absent. So I'm like, is Lewis on the ship? I assume he is. Is Watson on the ship? I assume he is. Because it's always Sherlock and Watson. So the question remains, where's Lewis? Where's Watson? Is Sherlock onto Moriarty's plan? Does he have any sneaking suspicions? It could be that Scotland Yard or the British government hired Sherlock to just be on the ship looking out for any, shenanigans, because this is a luxury cruise liner and it is their maiden voyage. So the British government might have been like, we have all these nobles on the ship, all this nobility. We need somebody on there to make sure nothing gets out of hand. So it could be that they just wanted Sherlock to be on the ship to look out for any shenanigans that might be happening. And lo and behold, here we are. So the question is Sherlock going to arrive on the scene with the Death 2 and try to piece it all together? Is he going to confront Moriarty about it? There's so many what ifs, and I'm so curious to see what's going to happen with this. I hate that it's a two-parter, y'all, but this is wonderful. I love this. So yeah, this was a great episode. I really liked it. So, in the meantime, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Like, were you as surprised to see Sherlock pop up in this as I was? Because I'm not gonna lie, I'm sure I was fangirling in the moment because I was like, oh my god, he's here. But I'm curious to know your thoughts down below, what you all thought of this episode. This series has gotten better and better. I really liked episode 1. I mean, episode 1 was good. It was a nice setup. Episode 2 and 3 was great backstory, setting up our characters. Episode 4 and 5 were like getting all the gang together. It just got better and better, but this episode's been really good. So, yeah, I am excited. So, in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back next week with Act 2 of the Noahtic on Moriarty the Patriot. Bye.